What is a true fact so baffling, it should be false?
Silent scan.
There is a 1 in roughly 5.2 to the 61st power chance that, if you were to slap a table, all of the molecules in your hand in the table would miss each other, and your hand would go through it. Story time. I learned this fact from a deep intellectual conversation with my engineering class 2 years ago, so there very well could be some kind of detail I'm missing here, but nonetheless, what I said is theoretically true.
Silent scan.
There used to be a radioactive energy drink called Raditha that was in the US market for a decade from 1918 to 1928. Some of the more prominent users had to be buried in lead coffins.
Silent scan.
When the 22nd president of the US, Grover Cleveland, was 27 years old, he was friends with a married couple who had a baby girl named Frances. As a gift, he bought them a high-end baby stroller for little Frances. 21 years later, he married Frances and she became the youngest first lady. Think about that.
Silent scan.
A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sickness or feeling ill, under close control. There have been studies since 60s. There is a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements and water intake without protein, carbohydrate or fat intake, no food at all. Dropped from 207 kilograms to 88 kilograms and maintained it. After a follow-up checkup 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilograms, stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects.
Silent scan.
The Life of Frayne Sellock, the luckiest unlucky man in the world. January 1962. Frayne is riding on a train through a freezing canyon when it fell into an icy river. All 17 other passengers died, while he escapes with a broken arm and hypothermia. 1963. On his first plane trip he was sucked out of the plane's door and landed in a haystack, unscathed. 19 other people were killed in the crash. 1966. He was riding in a bus when it skidded off the road into yet another icy river. 4 passengers drowned, while he only received some minor cuts and bruises. 1970. His car's engine burst into flames while he was driving, but he managed to escape before it exploded. 1973. In yet another driving incident, his car's engine was doused with hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents, singing off all of his hair. He was otherwise unharmed. 1995. He was hit by a bus, but only sustained minor injuries. 1996. To escape a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain curve, he swerved into a guardrail that broke on impact. To save himself, he jumped out of his car's open door and grabbed onto a tree branch as he watched his car plummet off the cliff. Suffice to say, the guy had a complicated relationship with the Grim Reaper.
Silent scan.
More people died making the V2 rockets during WW2 than were killed by them. Another fun fact about V2 rockets: Germany was facing a large issue with rocket fuel shortages during the project because people kept drinking it. The fuel was made from 70% ethyl alcohol and 30% water, distilled from potatoes. It was the most economically viable fuel at the time, since they were already very low on other fuels. To stop workers from drinking it, they denatured the alcohol, essentially poisoning it, but people kept drinking it anyways, and getting extremely ill. This simply caused people to start leaving the V2 program, suggesting that they were only in it for the free alcohol. This also means that any alcohol over 70% ABV is stronger than actual WW2 rocket fuel.
Silent scan.
Switzerland has accidentally invaded Liechtenstein thrice in the last 50 years. On the first time in 1976, Swiss military got lost and ended up in Liechtenstein, so the Liechtensteiners offered them drinks like proper hosts. On the second time in 1992, Swiss military forgot that a certain observation post was actually not in Swiss territory, but in Liechtenstein territory, so they just said sorry and forgot about it. Then again in 2007, the Swiss army got lost and entered Liechtenstein, but eventually realized they weren't in Switzerland anymore, Toto, so they turned back. Liechtenstein didn't even know this happened till the Swiss apologized, again, To which they basically said, "No problem, bro." Takeaways: the Swiss army are bad with directions. The Liechtenstein army people are chill brothers.
Silent scan.
From 1613 and 1620 a samurai traveled to Rome by way of Mexico. During this time, Shakespeare was still alive, Virginia had been founded for around a decade, Galileo was accused of heresy, and Pocahontas arrived in England. He met the Pope, he was made a Roman citizen. His name was Hasekura Tsuneniga, and was the last Japanese person to officially visit Europe, until around 1860.
Silent scan.
There was this French guy named Terror in the late 1700s that could eat anything, in any amount. He was able to eat a quarter of a cow in one day, and ate dinner for 15 for one meal, when he was being tested. He was even able to swallow an entire eel, with bones included, without hesitating. When he went to the military service, they used him as message transport, but after being captured he went back, and tried to find a cure. In the hospital, where he was staying, he was suspected of eating a baby, so they kicked him out. He was average weight, and when he died a few years later they could see inside his stomach just by opening his mouth. This was almost definitely an alien pretending to be a dude.
Silent scan.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to get even more awesome content. Come on, it just takes 1 second.
Silent scan.
A 500-pound cigarette smoking, beer drinking brown bear named Wojtek was enlisted and served in the Polish army during WWII. Private Wojtek helped the Polish win the brutal Battle of Mont Cassino, and was even promoted to corporal. Following the war, he retired in Scotland.
Silent scan.
If every single person on the entire planet took part in a rock paper scissors contest, where everyone paired up and played, losers were knocked out, and winners stayed on, etc. You would only have to win 33 times in a row to beat all 7.53 billion people on the planet.
Silent scan.
Saddam Hussein was an erotic romance novelist in his spare time as the dictator of Iraq. Is that why his character is such a romantic in the South Park movie?
Silent scan.
If you're launching from Earth, the most difficult place to reach in the solar system is the sun. The reason for this is that to fly directly into the sun you need to first launch from Earth, and then remove all of your orbital velocity around the sun. Anything less will just put you into a different orbit around the sun, rather than directly into it. The amount of power required for that to do it directly is basically impossible currently. As an alternative you could, for relatively little power, fly all the way out to Pluto distance, slow down much less, and then fall back into the sun. The trade-off being the travel time is now about 90 years. There are other in-between paths that could get you there for different balances of energy and time, but all of them are tougher than getting basically anywhere else in the solar system with an equivalent balance. There's a mission currently traveling to study the sun, the Parker Solar Probe. It won't be flying directly in, but plans to make the closest passes than any probe ever has. It's going to make 7 passes by Venus to shed speed so it can get closer and closer to the sun. The full flight time is planned as just less than 7 years. As of this post they are 1 week shy of a year in.
Silent scan.
A black widow spider's web is 12 times the tensile strength of steel.
Silent scan.
To scale, the distance between a nucleus and orbiting electron is 16 times longer than the distance between the sun and Pluto.
Silent scan.
The speed of light is always the same, regardless of the relevant speed of the observer. Say you're standing still, and a car passes you at 60 miles per hour, it passes you at 60 miles per hour, right? Say you're driving at 30 miles per hour and a car passes you at 60 miles per hour, because you're already moving at 30, the car only moves away from you at 30 miles per hour. Light doesn't work this way. If you're standing still and turn on a flashlight, the beam of light moves away from you at light speed. But if you're moving at half the speed of light and turn on a flashlight, the beam still moves away from you at light speed, even though it's only moving at the standard speed of light. So even people who aren't moving half the speed of light see it moving at the same speed as you do, which isn't possible. but is somehow true. It makes no sense and makes me think there is a lot to physics we still have to learn, and I bet we find out a lot of the things we know are wrong.
Silent scan.
It's pretty well known by now, but calculators today have more computing power than Apollo 11. We got to the moon with slide rulers and huge balls.
Silent scan.
In 1000 BC, a war was cancelled due to rain. Or duck it, Bruce. I didn't bring a jacket. I'll one-up you. Around the 500s BC, the Medes, modern-day Iran, fought the Lydians, modern-day Turkey, in a war. During the war, there was a mother-ducking solar eclipse and everything went black. Both sides freaked out and came to a peace agreement. Both sides stopped fighting each other during the eclipse as they thought it was the gods telling them something. This has been known as the Battle of the Eclipse for centuries, but no one really believed there was an eclipse. Then, scientists recently were able to backtrack and find out when every single solar eclipse happened, and lo and behold it happened right around the date of the battle. So now it is viewed as a historical fact. Edit. Extra fun fact. According to Herodotus's history, a Greek mathematician successfully and accurately predicted the eclipse on the day of the battle. This means that in 583 BC ancient scholars could successfully predict the sun's rotation to a T. 1200 years later people still thought the world was flat somehow, lol. Sucks the Roman Empire had to fall.
Silent scan.
If you took every civilian-owned firearm in the US and laid them side by side, you would have a giant belt of guns long enough to go completely around the moon. After going completely around the moon, you would still have enough guns left over to equip every soldier in the world with 2 guns.
Silent scan.
Genghis Khan killed half of the world's population. Half. Mother duckers.
Silent scan.
Congratulations, you reached the end of this awesome video. Now, like and subscribe, like we talked earlier, come on.
Silent scan.